Over the years, Bionicle has got a bit of a reputation with fragile joints. A well-deserved reputation, in my opinion. I think it's something Lego needs to answer for. I feel like I'm somewhat committing torture here. um, so what is this video? Well, today I'm going to be testing every single socket, at least that I have. I'm sure I've missed something obscure, but doing it to prove a point. Elec 2007 is a notorious set because of a color specifically included. Lime green. This is a color that's had a lot of problems in the past. Even today, there's a lot of conspiracy surrounding the color itself, not just because of fragility, although it has gotten better over the years, but also because of the color's inconsistency. This is first noted in the Lamborghini set, which was several hundreds of dollars, which is kind of unacceptable, to be honest, but I understand why it is the case. The plastic that is used in that set for the pieces that are specifically a different color are essentially a different type of plastic. At least that is my belief. I have no confirmation of this, but it feels different. It behaves differently from what I have experienced. And I have put together thousands upon thousands of Bionicle sets, of Lego sets, Technic sets, and so on. The reason I'm not afraid to do this is because Elec is a special case. Again, I do not have confirmation of this. However, Elec, I believe, was the first set to contain lime green sockets that came out in 2007. From what I can tell, from my experience, not every set is affected by the fragility issues. As you can see, I can pop this and it feels fine. It's not to say that cracks won't appear, but that is the case for all types of sockets. That is not what I'm judging here. Rather, I'm judging that explosive nature of the 2007 line. These sockets I am not afraid to use. Not because I don't have any that are broken, I absolutely do, but because these sockets specifically I know won't break, at least from my experience. And again, this isn't something I'm telling you guys you should do, but there's a feel. There's an aesthetic to pieces from 2007 that are in lime that is visible. It's hard to say exactly how to tell the difference. I don't know if I can do so on camera, if I can explain the difference on camera, but I can usually look at a 2007 socket and know that it is different from the Kali Rock set. Yes, I'm doing it again. It's actually kind of fun. I think the main reason is there's a slight transparency or translucency, maybe, to those 2005 lime green double sockets that doesn't exist with the Holly set, not to the same degree. In fact, I would argue even that Holly's sockets have no translucency, and that right there is a dead giveaway that something is wrong. This has that. This has not broken. Let's test some other sockets. Some of these sockets may break on camera. We'll just have to find out. But we're going to start, actually, with the first foot designed for the original Toamata sets all the way back in 2001. And I picked green specifically because this is actually one of the more fragile colors for this type of piece. Green and brown seem to be the most affected from my experience, though again, I do not worry about using these pieces. I have had one, maybe two break in my lifetime, and by break I mean a crack form, but never fully break and never lose their friction. So it hasn't really been a major issue for me. In fact, I've actually gotten sets specifically because, well, I'll get into that here in a minute. So in 2008, Lego released the Avmatorn with a brand new socket mold. And in doing so, they also decided to remold the foot. I think it's a weird change because they didn't do this for the Borak foot in 2009 with the Crotesius set, but they did it for 2008. And what I've noticed is that these feet are more fragile, which is weird. It is more plastic than what is on the 2001 version, but I have had dozens of these break. Again, I don't think I've had any fully break, but at the very least have a crack form all the way across, like a perfect snap on one of the four sides, right? Now, for some reason, I have like a billion of these in Metro Blue. Don't know why. Thankfully, those tend to hold up really well. Tan seems to be the worst color for this from my experience, but I only have, I think, 2 of those feet, so I can't say with any certainty if that is the case or if it's just my luck, right? Keith Orange seems to be pretty okay. Regular Orange also seems to be pretty okay, though I have had some of those break in the past as well. So it is a good piece, but overall it is more fragile from my experience than what we got in 2001. Bullrock feet, which were used pretty much throughout Bionicle's history after 2002, showed up in several sets. Also have a similar issue where they can snap along the edge, and I think it happens more often with Bullrock feet than with Mata feet. And again, specifically, the green, the brown. I think, had a white one break as well. And I believe most of the Metru colors, I have had all of them break at some point or another, including some of these brown ones, although this one is not broken. Again, I tried to pick pieces that weren't broken for the sake of this video. Moving on to another piece with the socket built in, we actually have 2 different molds of this. Unfortunately, the CCBS style socket would only be appearing in one set part-time, so you weren't guaranteed to get it, and it only appears in black. So this is a piece that appears in 4 different colors: black, dark bluish gray, Keat orange, and dark red. The Keat orange is the rarest, I believe, just because it only appears in one set. I believe all of the others appear in at least 2 sets. But these obviously can be fragile because of that 2008 socket. That was at least a very solid connection. So what I have learned in terms of dealing with sockets like this is to always go in as straight as you can and even possibly squeeze that socket inward as you connect. That's going to give you the best success rate from what I have experienced. The same is true when pulling it apart as well. Often what I end up doing, and I'll try and show this to you, is I take a piece and I will torque it to the side. It's just very easy to dislodge a ball joint that way, but I don't do that with 2008 style sockets just because they are inherently more fragile. So with these, I usually just pull, and again, I try to squeeze this if I can. That just prevents any extra stress. Essentially, your hands act as sort of shock absorbers for this. CCBS sockets are definitely better, but they're not immune to cracking, and this is something I've had to happen a lot with bone pieces specifically for CCBS. Basically any kind of bone, but especially the smallest ones, those crack like crazy, and it really frustrates me because so many people will tout how much stronger CCBS is, and sure, it's stronger than 2008, but arguably still less strong than the early sockets, which tells me that there is a change in the plastic. Well, someone told me, although I have not been able to confirm this for myself, that apparently Lego started making their own colors, mixing their own colors in-house in 2006, I believe. Maybe late 2006. This probably had an effect if this ends up being true. So if you know of a source for that, let me know, because I would love to know. The CCBS style socket would also show up on the Ben 10 foot. In fact, probably both of these feet, although it is ever so slightly different, usually because the hole on the sides, on both sides, is smaller. But it works just fine as well. I've not had any issues with these. And in fact, I would even say that they pop off the ball joint rather easily. I don't know if that's an intentional design, but it's not too easy. Like, it feels right. It feels appropriate. So it works out really well. It's just very unfortunate that Lego decided to put the ball joint at a weird angle. I don't know what they were doing here, but whatever. CCBS socket would also show up on both different versions of the Beast Foot as well. And again, haven't really had any major issues with these cracking either. I believe I have one that might be cracked along this backside, and I think it is just a black one or maybe silver. Silver seems to crack more often than black does from my experience, but I can't say that's something that's carried across the board. Flat silver specifically. And again, the socket also appears, a brand new type of socket as well, on the underside of CCBS shells. I have seen these broken. I have never broken one myself. I do believe I at least own one piece with a broken socket though. And I can't remember what color it is, but I think it's silver as well. So just going forward with that. So you also have your standard hand sockets, all introduced all the way back in, I believe, 1999 with the Slicer Throwbot series, right? I don't believe that these would make an appearance in Robo Riders, but correct me if I'm wrong there. And that is obviously a very usable piece, and 99% of these that I have owned have never broken. And actually, where they break most often for me is not in the socket, but on this connection up here. Lego does a very poor job designing the socket, in my opinion. I understand why it is designed the way it is, with this sort of cutaway in here, right? It's a little bit thinner, and that is to allow gears to pass, though this is hardly ever utilized. They do work. They work quite well. In fact, that is still a feature of sockets even to this day as well. I should mention, with an axle connection, it will have that cutaway in there. But yeah, never really run into issues with that socket by its design, rather by its color, right? So it's not a flaw with the design itself, in my opinion, just the color that's being used. 2008, again, would introduce this socket here, which we would actually get two different versions of. There are two slightly different molds, and you'll know which one you have based on A, where this mold mark is, and B, if that axle actually connects with the opening on this side. This seems to relieve some stress, so this version does seem a little bit better than the version that came out prior. However, this one is actually already cracked, and I don't know if I just caused that crack. I don't feel like I did, because when I snapped them together, it snapped together pretty easily, and I didn't hear anything. So that crack was likely already there, and I just didn't spot it before the video. But notable. These don't really come in any colors that the classic versions do, though, as far as I can recall. So it's not terribly important if these ones break. You usually always have an option with the older sockets, so it's more of an aesthetic choice. If you like the aesthetic of those sockets, it's probably better to go with something like CCBS, where that color is available. CCBS, on the other hand, would have sockets available in exclusive colors like medium azure, and the modern version of the CCBS socket would even come out in pearl gold, which I do not have yet. This socket, oh boy, that is a very tight socket, because there is more surface area to contact it, and also because that hole isn't there, they don't flex quite as easily. But I've still had these crack. Thankfully, any of the ones that I have that have cracked, I no longer own. So I can't show you those. But 2004 would also give us the friction socket, which I have never had break, although I believe I've seen some that have broken in the past. So you'll have to let me know your mileage on those pieces. 2004 would also introduce the double socket, and same kind of thing. Again, we started this video popping these. Never really had an issue with too many of these, though they do break on occasion. The ones that I believe are the most fragile from my experience are the occasional lime green. In fact, the majority of lime green sockets, I would say, from Elec are fragile, but early sets seemed to release with the earlier quality of lime green, and thus are not as fragile. Is that to say they won't break? Of course not. Any socket can break. Prydac, on the other hand, with the white sockets, those actually are a bit fragile from my opinion. Never had one fully break, but I have definitely had them crack and lose a lot of friction because of that. And I think every one of them I own might actually be cracked, which is really unfortunate, because that is exclusive to the Prydac set, and I don't hear many people really mention it. 2005 would, of course, give us the long double socket. I call it 5 long, but it's actually 7 long. I'm just measuring the distance between the connection points on there. Again, difficult to find any of these that will crack, except again in 2007. However, 2006 also introduced this in pearl dark gray or gunmetal on the Finrack set, and those are notoriously fragile as well, though I don't see it mentioned quite that often. Of course, again, 2008 would give us a brand new mold, which is unfortunate, because this would come in some exclusive colors like this dark blue here, as well as dark red, and these, of course, are more fragile. Thankfully, I do not believe this one is broken, so that's a plus. And I have actually seen prototypes of these colors, but in the older style as well. Unfortunately, never gotten my hands on them. I do believe they're probably pretty rare. But still, always really nice to see them. Maybe some of these are floating around there. And of course, bootleg versions of these exist in the older style and also in the CCBS style, I believe, as well. So very interesting to see. Have no experience with any of those, can't speak to them, and they're not Lego. So again, kind of out of the purview of this video. One socket I do not believe I will be experimenting with today, just because I don't have enough of them, is the 2009 side socket, double socket here. Again, fragile. That's to be expected. We already knew that going in. And yeah, it is rather unfortunate. They do go with that open axle to the socket. So at some point they recognized, in fact, I can see that this one is cracked in 2 places. They do recognize that, oh yeah, we need to change that mold again. And they do it for this piece. Now, I don't know if this piece comes in the older style, 2008 style as well or not. I have not looked close enough. But yeah, definitely interesting. And one socket that goes overlooked quite often, this little guy right here. I usually keep it in with my weapons rather than sockets because it's really not like, it has one connection point running right through it. You can pass an axle through there, but it's just a weird little piece. It doesn't have a lot of friction, even though it's made of a softer material. Honestly, again, I don't know what Lego was thinking when designing these pieces. I kind of understand why they did it. Again, weird sockets. That's all I can say. But yeah, there are definitely some interesting things out there, and you can see the evolution of sockets as time goes on. But I don't feel like any of these evolutions really ever came close to something like this, because these didn't break, or rarely broke, and usually it was the more modern versions of them that would break. It makes me wonder why they didn't return to form. I get it to a degree. I imagine, when they changed plastic in 2006, 7, whenever they did, right, that at some point it was kind of like a lost cause, right? Because Lego can't realistically offer a special type of plastic only for sockets because it's of the expense, right? If you think about it, the sockets had always been made with ABS or something very close to it in the past. Maybe it's a refined form of ABS, I don't know, but it is very likely that that is the same kind of plastic that they would use for something like system bricks. It's not polypropylene, it's not something else, right? And so if they were going to keep these sockets only for their construction lines and also make them out of different materials, I think the thing that would justify it would be CCBS as a system, since it's a very strange conundrum to me to think about the fact that late Bionicle was plagued with fragile joints. And we know that these joints over time will degrade because that's the nature of plastic in general. To then go out of your way to develop a system like CCBS, which is built around ball-and-socket joints, it's strange to me. It is a weird concept. I have my gripes with CCBS, and I'll talk about that in a separate video, but suffice to say, sockets are weird. So that's pretty much it for this one. If you guys did enjoy the video, make sure you are subscribed. And even if you're not subscribed, thanks for watching. Thanks for lending me your eyes. With that said, though, you can check out Discord, Instagram, and Patreon in the description below. And of course, I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.